Hello, hello. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Savage Healing AF podcast. Hope you guys are having an amazing week. So it has been snowing for the last couple of days. Like we got just murdered with snow here in the Chicagoland area. So it has been a whirlwind. So I had to take a snow day with my kids, even though I was off of work. But yeah, I kind of altered my schedule. So like my gym schedule, I need to get back into the gym. I need that therapy. Yeah, nothing makes me feel better than lifting heavy, of course. So I am trying to achieve muscle mommy status. That is my goal as I'm doing this winter arc. So just some quick updates. I am ramping up videos for the YouTube channel. So got some things in the works that I am working on. So make sure you guys follow along, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the TikTok channel as I'm getting ready to put out some new content for that and working on some other things as far as that goes. So everything is in the show notes. So make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you like, share, follow the podcast, and share it with somebody that needs to hear it, to you badass women out there. So let's get into today's episode. So in today's episode, I figured we have a little deep dive discussion about how your inner child picks your partner. Now, I know that is a crazy way to say it, but this is part of the passion and the work that I have really rebranded and shifted to, because it really hits home with me, because when it comes to your inner child picking your partner, there are similarities in that. And so we're going to dive deep into that. So it's basically like dating your past. So what do I mean by that? So a lot of times, depending on how we grew up as children and what we experienced in our childhood, really mirrors the way we view relationships and how we have relationships with other people. So, for example, for me, my inner child is the father wound. You could have a mother wound. You could have, or both. You could have parents that were emotionally unavailable. So that could also mirror that. So dating your past is, something that is being mirrored to you from the past on how you didn't receive love, you were dismissed, or you were told your feelings were bad and you just dismiss them and you avoid them. That could be things that can pertain to dating your past and having your inner child pick your partner. So there are certain attachment styles that do, present themselves, and people usually fall in two categories. Very rarely do they fall in both. So you have your anxious and your avoidant attachment style. Okay. And I'm also going to talk about, people who are emotionally unavailable and why we continue this cycle of picking people like that. Goes back to your inner child picks your partner. And most of them are emotionally unavailable because depending on how you grew up. So as far as attachment styles, like the anxious attachment style, I have that anxious attachment style, but I can tell you it's moved more into a secure, because I've really done a lot of healing and a lot of work on myself and become self-aware of my fear of abandonment, my insecurities, not feeling worthy, not feeling good enough, not confident, because those are all things that I felt as a child from my father wound, because my biological dad did abandon me as a child. And I felt very insecure because when I would see him, I half expected that he would leave again and wanted to hold on so tight that I couldn't. And I had that, fear of, oh my gosh, he's never going to come back. What if I did something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Was I a good kid? Was I respectful? I should have done more. And then when we're adults, things that get mirrored back is the same thing. I don't want him to leave, so I'm going to stay small. I'm just going to be quiet. I'm not going to trigger him. I'm not getting a text every 5 seconds. Like, we have to stop that bullshit, okay? Because people will show you who they really are. It is up to you to be self-aware and to believe them. Okay. So when it comes to being anxiously attached, it's like you want to just grip that person when they're trying to pull away from you, and you want to grip them harder. A lot of times we have to let them go. And, you have that fear is because you haven't dealt with the inner child part of the father wound, the mother wound, or both, that gives you that anxious attachment style. And you have that fear that people are going to leave, they don't like you, and this and that. And those are the things that can be mirrored back, especially in relationships. Now, we also have the avoidant attachment style. Let me tell you, I have a lot of fucking experience when it comes to avoidant men, because that seemed to be what I attracted, because my biological dad is an avoidant. He avoided his responsibility. He avoided being a father. He avoided being there. He avoided just, making sure that he, gave me the tools and raised me as a daughter. And as an adult, like, I struggled with relationships with men for a long time because I would make myself feel small and I wasn't as confident, instead of saying in my power and saying, you know what, fuck you. If you want to leave, go. Okay. That's the thing. And I just kind of go back to, when it comes to people who are avoidant, closeness is a lot. Like, they fear closeness because it's probably something that they didn't receive as a child, or they were told that love was bad and they were, evil, or they were just, they feel consumed if you, love them too hard, or you're suffocating them. So, avoidance, they avoid closeness. They avoid, doing the work. They avoid being the best version of themselves. They avoid all those things because that is something that was mirrored back to them as a child. And like I said, I like relationships that I've had post-divorce, avoidant men. Okay. It's because I hadn't dealt with that part of really facing my inner child and having like a conversation and saying, listen, we can't operate like this because it's not healthy, because it affects every part of your life. When you are unhealed, that shit carries on until you deal with it. And it's going to continue to rear its ugly head and fucking show up in everything that you do until you face it. So I'm going to give you a personal story. One of the things that I did do to really stop having my inner child pick my partner is I did something called an empty chair experiment. So I don't read a lot of self-help books. I really don't. But the few that I do, because I, needed to do some extra healing this year, and it really, really needed some kind of guidance. And I look for it as guidance and just for information. I don't listen to any of these gurus on TikTok and things like that. Like, I actually pick up a book and get information, and then I tailor it to my experience. So one of the things that I did with this empty chair test, I did it with two different scenarios. The very first scenario that I did it with was with an ex. And this is like somebody who is recent, and it's from a recent breakup, very, very recent, because I did not receive closure on what I needed to hear as far as why this relationship ended. To give a little bit of context, it ended suddenly. And the reasons that were given were it just didn't make sense to me. So I was very hurt. My world just crashed because I was very much in love with this person. I really cared about this person. I showed up for this person, and I love hard because I go in hard because, you know what? I was just becoming the best version of myself with this person because there was calm, there was safety, there was security, and I didn't have a lot of thoughts because my brain was calm. So when you feel like that, you really give your all to this person. So what I did is I took two chairs, because that's what this exercise tells you to do, and you put them facing each other. Let me tell you, I had the biggest anxiety, and I had already started crying when I sat down because I didn't want to do it, because I had that visualization of him facing me. Like I could clearly see his face. And I started to just unload. Like, I didn't write a script. I didn't do anything. I just started freely talking about why and how I felt and what this did to me and why. And you gave me a lot of unanswered questions, and you just left me to pick up the pieces. And then I let myself get a good cry. I let it all out. And then the other part of the exercise is you switch chairs and you sit with it where they would be sitting. And so they would be facing you. And so what you get to do in this part of the exercise is you get to say what you need to hear, not what you think they would say, what you need to hear. And I went ahead and just unloaded on everything that I needed to hear to really create that closure for me. It was the most powerful exercise I've ever done. And then I did that exercise a week later with my biological dad. That one was very painful. That one took me a little bit to really get through, but I said everything I needed to say. And what it did is it really started to get me out of that anxious attachment style and avoiding just the anger and the feelings that I had just been suppressing for so many years when it came to my biological dad, that I just freely spoke and I just let it all out. And it really just started to make me feel more secure, not only within myself, but when I proceed with relationships with men, because I can see, and I'm so self-aware now that I can see just, does this person make me feel good? Does this person really value what I do? Does this person really make me safe? Can I really feel just calm with this person? And I can ask myself all those questions and not have to resort to the anxious attachment style that I've hung on to for so many years. So, and I sat down with my inner child and I said, listen, I love you. I know this was hard. You went through a lot. Nobody's going to hurt us anymore because I'm not going to allow it. And I'm not going to let you sit here and run the constant cycle because we don't need to do this anymore. So when you sit down and you have a conversation with your inner child, it's really, really powerful because you don't want your inner child to be picking your partner. You want to be self-aware. You want to be secure. And you want to say, okay, this shit doesn't feel good to me. I'm out. And you should be able to make those decisions from the start. So I'm going to give you a little takeaway with this episode. I want you to think about this. What did love feel like growing up? So let me repeat that. What did love feel like growing up? You know, was it hard? Was it not shown? Did you have to perform to get love? Like, let's say, get straight A's in order to be loved and accepted? So really ask yourself that question. And if you have to journal, voice note, I love voice notes because, you know, I like to listen to what I say because it's very powerful and I can hear it back. So we don't need to let our inner child pick our partner. We need to sit down and say, listen, it was hurtful. Yes, they were wrong. They shouldn't have treated us this way, but this is how we're going to proceed. And this is how we're going to do things. And I've got you. So that is this week's episode. I hope this was really helpful. Make sure you share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Make sure you check out everything in the show notes. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you know when the latest episodes drop. And make sure you follow me on TikTok so you can get the latest and greatest as far as educational videos. So thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast episode, and I will chat with you guys next week.